Dzień dobry. Welcome everyone. Witam
Good
Państwa na
morning. I would like to welcome you at Bilingual Expert Debate Europe's Green Future. In the beginning, I would like to share with you some
You can listen
technical
to our debate
information.
wholly in Polish or wholly in English after clicking at the interpretation icon down on your screens where you see three dots. Just choose interpretation. Po prostu proszę wybrać trzy kropeczki. Tam jest napis interpretation,
Now
czyli
we are
tłumaczenie.
translating it into English. After selecting three dots, you will go into interpretation and you will be able to choose the Polish or English interpretation, Polish or English channel in our debate. Let's start. Once again, I'd like to welcome you very warmly at the Europe's Green Future debate organized by Euractiv Poland under the patronage of the European Commission and the European Parliament. We are going to talk whether the change of power at the European Union institutions will translate into the change of the European policies in Europe, for example, the European Green Deal, and if yes, then in what way? We will also talk how to combine competitiveness in Europe with our environmental ambitions and climate ambitions. To discuss this subject, we succeeded in inviting the most important dissidents, decision makers, and stakeholders in Europe. We have together with us Ms. Urszula Zielińska, Secretary of State at the Ministry of Climate and Environment in Poland. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Karolina, Editor-in-Chief. Adam Jarubas, who is at the Commission of Protection of European who's the member of the European Parliament at the Commissions, and Toriel Shobanu Daria, Director of Circular Economy at the European Commission in DG ENVI, the European Union Commission. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. Felicia Stoika, Vice President, Vice Head of Unit Single Market and Industrial Policy at the European Commission, DG GROW for Small and Medium Enterprises in the European Commission. Good afternoon. Jean-Marc Simon, founder of Zero Waste Europe.
And last but not least, Virginia Janssens, dyrektorka zarządzająca.
And Virginia Janssens, Managing Director of Plastics Europe. Welcome. My name is Karolina Zbytniewska, and I am the Editor-in-Chief of Euractiv Polska, and it is my pleasure and my honor to host this very important and multifaceted debate. And without further ado, I will move on to the introductory question concerning the change of organization in the European Parliament, the change of the set. The European Parliament's powers have changed, and we have ahead of us changes at the most important positions. What are the plans for the Ministry of Environment for the coming presidency? Minister Połczyńska-Nałęcz or Member of the Parliament Halicki mentioned importance in changes in the Green Deal, ETS2 and Fit for 55 package. What is not going on well right now, and what do we think we should change according to our government? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is a great pleasure to discuss such an important subject in such a breakthrough moment at the new term of office of the European Parliament. We are discussing it when in our everyday lives and in a very tangible way we can notice consequences of the growing climate crisis. Further crises also overlap. We face challenges in Europe such as war at the eastern border of Poland, Russian aggression on Ukraine, fuels and energy sector is used as a tool in this war, and all those crises are intertwined with climate crisis. They amplify one another. I will have to also mention the migration crisis, which results from the increasing climate change and climate troubles. People from the southern hemisphere move to the northern hemisphere because uh, conditions in the northern hemisphere are still acceptable, and people from the south you have to move because the conditions of life in their territory are unsupportable. And it had been foreseen in reports about climate change tens of years ago. Today, we are still not ready for those changes. And I'd like to emphasize that we are struggling with those multiple crises today. However, we are in this situation right now and we have to face it. We have already invented technologies for solving those problems and we have ways to solve it. Those technologies are not easy to implement, but it is possible. We also have resources to develop certain solutions. We, as Europe, uh, gathered lots of solutions to stop increasing temperature globally. However, implementation is very slow. We have to look into it, we have to find new solutions, and we have to regroup in order to implement it. In our European Parliament, we have also a group which is against this climate change, and they are going to spread information that climate change is not caused by human factor. In addition, we have to face the situation where Russia's climate policy has, and Russia's point of view on the European climate policy has been redefined as their most important external challenge. I have to emphasize it because this information is not widely known. However, we can read about it in analysis prepared in Poland by the Eastern Studies Center. Russia, in its energy doctrine from 2019, decided that the European Union's climate policy of moving out from fossil fuels, including gas, carbon, and crude oil import from Russia, is the most important external threat for Russia in Russia's eyes. And since then, Russia has been implementing the policy of disinformation in Europe, and it concerns the European Union's policy. The European climate policy in Europe is widespread. We all know it. And before we disassemble it into small pieces and start to fight against it, we should be aware, all of us, that it is here to increase our resilience to climate change. Its goal is to stop important losses in finances and to human health and life caused by climate crisis. I'd like to remind you that only in Poland we lose around 8 billion Polish zlotys yearly only due to drought and floodings caused by climate change. The analysis of climate change by the Ministry of Environmental Protection is talking about it. It is a report from 2022. This is 8 billion of losses only due to those three most important consequences of climate change: drought and floodings, which touch on agriculture mainly. So this climate change policy responds to such threats to our security. It also brings us a possibility to be independent from energy sources from Russia and from countries which are not democratic. Today, as Europe, we buy gas from them and we deliver millions of euros to them in this way. Consequently, oh, I'm sorry.
Proszę najmocniej. Tutaj postawię kropkę i dam
This is
głos
the place when I would like to end my speech, and I will give the floor to the next person.
Bo właśnie zrobiła Pani nam naprawdę dobre i ważne i ciekawe
Minister,
wprowadzenie.
thank you very
Jednak
much for this very
nie
important
odpowiedziała
and
Pani
interesting
na
introduction.
pytanie,
However, you did not
jakich
respond to the most
rewizji
important question.
w Zielonym Ładzie
What type of
oczekuje
review
Polska?
Poland
I
expects
czy
in the Green
możemy o
Deal?
to jeszcze przynajmniej krótko i konkretnie dopytać?
We would like to ask this question for your at least short
Tak, nie
answer.
dopowiadam, przepraszam.
Yes, I'm
Mam jakieś
sorry.
problemy z głosem.
Unfortunately, I have a problem with
Ale to
cough.
najważniejsze.
Gdybym mogła poprosić, żebyś pani redaktor przeszła do innych osób, a ja na koniec bardzo szybko powiem.
Dobrze.
Dear editor-in-chief, please come back to this question to me in just a few minutes. I respond to it in a few minutes. All right. I have a similar question to Member of the Parliament Adam Jarubas. What legislative consequences can we foresee due to the change in the European Parliament? And we have extreme right coming to power. What consequences will it bring? Thank you very much for your invitation. I think that we should draw conclusions from all the mistakes we have committed as the European Parliament and as people in general, because in some areas regulations were moved too far and we lacked communication. Some provisions were not clear enough to be able to dismantle this threat, and we faced certain fake information. We may say that Green Deal as environmental and economic strategy became one of the most important topics in this campaign, and it was an opportunity to attack the European Union. The Green Deal became this type of truncheon for fight, and it is the basis for such arguments as regulations which are not down to earth. And we also talk about the Buildings Directive, which is not clear in its provisions concerning, for example, giving up gas up to 2040. It was one of the most discussed subjects in the Polish political campaign. Lack of good communication was very important. When we look back, and if I were to refer to your question, I may say that in the past, the European People's Party I represent did its best to be the proponent of the Green Deal because we have to follow this directory. Climate change is here. We have to counteract it.
But as regards certain provisions or indexes that need to be reached, we did not win the vote. Usually the socialists, either in cooperation with the Greens or the other parties, they won the votes on those matter. If it hadn't been like that, we would have not Fit for 55, but perhaps Fit for 50. Impact assessments that had been carried out by the European Commission before adoption of a climate law showed that we would have been able to reach the goals of the Paris agreements if it hadn't been done that way. Then we wouldn't have to introduce ETS 2, which is also strongly criticized nowadays. Analyses are being published. It's not clear what they are based on, however they are in the public sphere. We don't have access to source data though, but they suggest that the costs for private households will increase rapidly, cost of fuel, cost of heating, and cost of transportation, they claim. Another regulation that luckily was amended in the end, but led to a lot of chaos, was the so-called nature restoration law. Mostly criticized provisions were withdrawn in the end. However, a certain feeling of a lack of clarity is still there. For example, the reduction of 10% of agricultural land reduction, etc. Such developments only strengthen Eurosceptical circles. Of course, I still don't know what the division of powers and how political groups will form in the European Parliament. Probably in the end there will be several groups on the right-hand side of the spectrum, but it is already clear that it will be a different parliament. Probably the main direction will remain the same. The parliament will support the Green Deal. However, we see a stronger voice from Eurosceptical circles in the Netherlands and France. So I wonder how the vote in the council will turn out. We might be dealing with some problematic situations. So in the end, we don't know what the final result will be between the Council and the Parliament. Thank you very much for your in-depth and interesting analysis. In a sense, I will come back to some of the topics you raised in the second round of questions, because the question is why Poland failed to suggest any amendments to the nature restoration law if indeed it hadn't been drafted in a proper way. However, now I would like to move on to my question to Felicia Stoica from the European Commission.
Change the language into English. What's the future of the European Green Deal and other green legislation after elections? Do you see the political willingness remaining to keep the pace and meet net zero emissions reduction and carbon neutrality?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for your kind invitation. I'm very happy to be here at this very important momentum for the EU, but also for what we take forward in terms of our objectives for Green Deal. First of all, I just need to point out this political momentum, right? So we are in a phase of just adapting to a slightly new reality, politically speaking. So we had the elections. Now we are also waiting from the Commission side to see the structure of the new college. And of course, with that, we are going also to see the priorities for the next Commission, those that also are hinged into what will be the future and how we are going to take forward the objectives of the Green Deal. For now, what we have the strategic agenda. So that was recently published. We all know about it. It speaks clearly, increasing manufacturer capacity for net zero technologies, among many, many other things. We also have the EUCO conclusions of April that states very clear that the Commission and the EU will come forward with a competitiveness deal in this political cycle, a competitiveness deal that would be also underpinned by a new modernized single market strategy. So we have all these sort of elements at hand. I would add here also the Competitiveness Council conclusions that hints into what we need to do further in terms of industrial policy, but also single market. This being said, zooming in again into the Green Deal, definitely we have a case, a very strong case, to look at the objectives for Green Deal in terms of competitiveness and growth in the EU. So up to now, we've been discussing, yes, we need to reduce emissions. We need to become greener just to meet the net zero goals of 2050 with the intermediate benchmarks, of course, but we do see clearly a scope to have the Green Deal objectives underpinning the competitiveness of the EU economy and to ensure growth and jobs. And let me develop a little bit on that. So we have clean energy technologies and net zero industries that are one of the most promising, I would say, high growth markets. And to give you a number, it is projected about 600 billion euros annually by 2030, which means it will triple the current levels. I also checked a little bit because I was curious to see how Poland is doing in that front. And I saw that a lot of investment had been done by Poland in lithium-ion battery manufacturing. And surprisingly, or not, maybe for you, is that Poland's production capacity rose so high. I saw a number of 73 gigawatts per hour in 2022 that overtook actually the US, and it became the second largest in the world behind China. So very, very interesting numbers out there and a very good trend. Of course, I saw so many areas of improving in terms of, for example, permitting, etc. But that I will leave it aside. This being said, what we're also, of course, looking from the angle of industry and what industry has brought forward to us in terms of what we need to prioritize. And to that, of course, we're in contact with the industry regularly, but we also have looked into Antwerp Declaration, as you may know, that was signed by more than 1,000, I think, 300 organizations and companies. And clearly there is a strong case to continue with our objectives. And this being said, I think as far as we can say, I'm coming from DG Grow perspective, is that we are going to look at this in terms of a business case, right? So what a company needs. We look first at the ground, inputs, materials. What do we need to do that? And of course, this is very important when we speak about critical raw materials. Net Zero Industry Act. So implementation, it's actually a key. I'm sorry, I will need to break a bit. Yeah, I hope there was not a trend.
No problem.
This is Ursula before, but
Sorry, I hope it's not a virus I spread. I was trying not to.
That must be a cyber virus in this case. Okay, so joke aside, just to continue. So I was speaking about inputs and materials. They're extremely important. They're the starting point for our, let's say, business case, business journey. And there, I mentioned Critical Raw Materials Act. Will be forceful in implementation, both Critical Raw Materials Act, but also Net Zero Industry Act. We are also looking into, of course, energy overall, because energy is an input that is highly necessary, and there we do have, and we need to maintain low costs and low prices for energy. We have numbers that have been plugged into annual single market and competitiveness report.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I started hearing after the cough part. We started hearing some problems with the sound on the side of the microphone. Maybe you can now reconnect. Yes.
Yeah. Is it better?
Now, yes, it's good. Now it's good.
Okay. So again, the cough makes some damages here, virtual. So, sorry about that. Then, yes, I was talking about implementation of the two legal acts and treating energy broadly in terms of making sure that there is sustainable and affordable energy at the factory gate, and not only for industrial consumers, but also for citizens, for households. So that's an important sort of element to point out, because I was mentioning annual single market and competitiveness report. If you zoom into the chapter of energy, you will see that still, okay, our prices have decreased slightly due to the interventions that we have made and the measures that we have made, but still they are 2 to 3 times higher than in the US. So there we see clearly that I would see it as a priority area for the Commission to continue the work. We are also moving, I spoke about input materials. Then what do we need more? We need infrastructure, right? So to be able to facilitate the deployment of decarbonized energy, we need energy grids, for example, just to adapt to the reality of the new net zero energy mix. So that's something we will need to make sure and to adapt to the existing infrastructure. Then another element that is needed is technology and innovation. On the one hand, to automate and to digitalize as much as possible, but also to invest in research and innovation. And here I must say the EU looks pretty well. Again, I make reference to this analytical work that we have done through the annual single market and competitiveness report. And you will see there that the trend is rather good. I think we are almost alike in terms of investments in the research and innovation with China in terms of GDP spendings. both for public and private spendings. However, the issue here, and where we need to put more effort, and this I'm turning also to Poland as well as to all the other member states, is the scale up. We are excelling in innovating, and a clear example are the photovoltaics. They were born here in the EU, and see where we are now. We are having overcapacity and struggling in the sector struggles in that front because of take up by China in a more I would say aggressive way. Let's put it this way. Then, so again, scale up. But when we speak about scale up, what else do we need? And not only scale up, but overall to achieve all of these objectives, we need investments. And here, when we speak about investment, of course, everybody wants more money, but the money are limited. The pocket is limited, unfortunately, and we know that. What do we need? We need to find clever ways of attracting private investments, because that is the key. And the way we see it is just, let's put some warranties, budget guarantees, so that we are able to help the companies with de-risking, right? So we incentivize companies to invest by providing this de-risking mechanism. So that's one way to look at it. Of course, there are other mechanisms. I could make reference to IPCI, so in integrated projects for common European interests, which are quite successful in their way. Of course, probably there is a need to streamline there and to adapt the system to make it more agile. Last but not least, and I will stop here, it's a last element that we see is, okay, we increase production capacity. We have all of this ideally, right, in place, but we also need a market. So we need to create a market that will absorb net zero technologies and renewable energy products. And for that, how do we go about it? Because of course, we may start to produce in the EU, but the prices of the products produced in the EU are higher, right, than those that come from elsewhere. Let's be, realistic, from China. Then the question is, how can we incentivize, or how can we stimulate the consumers, be it industrial or citizens, to adopt premium sustainable products in their activities in day-to-day life. And there, us from the public side, we can use, for example, as a leverage public procurement. And to public procurement, there was a political agreement that we need to look into the framework, we need to modernize it, and modernizing it means we need to have robust criteria for sustainability, for resilience, for cybersecurity, but maybe also social criteria. So I will stop here, and I'm very happy to take over any questions you may have.
Thank you. A lot of concrete information. We are writing an article report from our debate, so that if you don't manage to note everything that you find important down, you will be able to read it in English and in Polish. We'll send the article to all the audience participants and of course to the panelists too. So Jean-Marc Simon, I would like to ask you more or less the same question. So what will happen now after the change in the European Parliament, and also from the perspective of all the years that you are in Zero Waste Europe, how would you assess the trajectory of developments in terms of green regulation, Green Deal, waste management, circularity, climate neutrality? How would you evaluate that, where we are at?
Thank you, Carolina, and thanks for the invitation. A pleasure to be here. I have to say that I started coughing as well, even though I haven't coughed in the last week. So I mean, like, I don't know if it's something that we copy each other. So thanks for the question. A bit where we are now, I think that the previous speakers have already laid a bit the context when it comes to politically. We understand that this new European Parliament has changed a bit, but I think it's good news still that I think that the democratic forces are still majority, and there's not going to be a deadlock, I think, when it comes to the future negotiations, which I think is good news. When we look at where we come from and where we are now, Well, first thing we need to see is that, well, the Paris Agreement, clearly we are not in line to actually to delivering a net zero yet. We are exhausting our carbon budget. Even if we hit net zero by 2050, we will have overused our carbon budget that is in the Paris Agreement. So that is problematic. According to the International Resource Panel, they saying that by 2060, the resource extraction could rise by 60% from 2020 levels, which means that, again, we are using a lot more resources than we can, considering that the planet has limited resources. The European Environmental Agency has published a report on accelerating the circular economy in Europe, where it says that the material footprint has been stable since 2010, but mainly because of COVID, but it will go up again. That waste generation continues to increase despite lots of years of waste legislation. That recycling increased a bit the last 10 years, but honestly, it's still stagnating, generally speaking, considering we have so much legislation on recycling. The fact we should see recycling go up like this, and actually recycling is barely catching up with waste generation. And again, when it comes to the use of circular materials, we see little improvement and then a bit of stagnation. So what this all mean is that, well, we have lots of legislation, but what we are missing here clearly is an enforcement, and to make sure that we translate the laws into the impact that we want to see in actually having a better use of materials. Even the Environment Council conclusions from a couple of weeks ago, they were asking for targets in material use per capita. So all of that to say that I think the legislation we have so far is good, but I think it's insufficient for the goals we have set ourselves. That I think that is a fact, and that's a technical consideration. Something else is what is politically feasible, given the forces that we have in the parliament and in the institutions. I will also say that lots of the solutions that we are seeing with declarations from the industry, but even from the institutions, is that it looks like the solution to the problems to competitiveness is innovation, technology, investment, cutting unnecessary red tape. But the bad news with this is that this we have already heard it before. We had it before. The Juncker plan of 10 years ago, it was basically that. We had investment, it was cutting red tape, etc. And in the end, you look at the results I explained before. We are not more competitive, and we are not increasing also the better use of materials. I agree with what has been said about the importance of public procurement to stimulate demand, but I think that what the EU needs to consider in this transition is actually how do we bring the citizens on board. Part of the problem of the political situation today in Europe is the fact that lots of Europeans are disappointed and they don't see a future. They're losing their jobs. So actually organizing a just transition that delivers jobs in the refurbishment, in the new renewable energies, into the circular economy. All of this is something that clearly we have not been able to articulate. But also demand-side measures, like anything that has to do with taxation, CBAM, really protecting the single market from what I think is dumping from outside Europe, social dumping, that for me a priority. And from a legal perspective, I think that it's time for the EU to stop focusing so much on waste and look more at material use. Because again, if the EU would be a company, what you care is about the inputs, the resources that you use in the production process, not about the waste that comes out. And for that, we have more than 70 targets dealing with waste, recycling, etc. We have, I think, 1 or 2 on prevention and nothing almost on material use. So I think that's for me what should be the priorities for the next Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So many complain about over-ambition of the EU, but as you say, it doesn't always translate into so ambitious reality. So now let's move and ask Virginia Janssens about your take on what what impact do you see from the shift in power at the European Parliament, and that it has and will have on legislative processes of green regulations like the Green Deal?
Okay, thank you, Carolina. Can you hear me well? Because I have some IT issues.
Yes, yes, very well.
Thank you. So look, I'm surely not going to repeat what has been said. So I agree with the political shift. Also what Jean-Marc said on, we still have pro-majority, pro-democratic parties in the European Parliament. Perhaps the only thing I might add there, and that is something to watch out, and that's also echoing what Ms. Stojka said on the importance of the internal market and keeping it together, keeping the harmonization in place, keeping the implementation in place, is that we do see, of course, there might be some more perhaps some more populist measures that might be taken. There are also some parties now in that might not be so pro-European integration, might not be so pro-EU single market. So that might also, that's just a watch out to see whether how this will be done, because we're talking about the Green Deal, we're talking about billions and billions of investments, we're talking about boosting our competitiveness. We're talking about an industrial plan across Europe. Ms. Stojka also said about, how can we boost our energy deficit now in terms of cost? How can we do this? So we need more connection, more interconnectedness between the EU member states to make this Green Deal and the implementation of the Green Deal a solid business case. And make it more attractive to invest in this transition for Plastics Europe. And so we represent the 90% of the polymer industry in Europe. I don't want to sound too alarming, but it is a case indeed that we are losing our competitiveness. If you compare it from the global perspective, so we are now at 14% production as part of the global production. In 2006, this was still at 22%. So we are losing that ground to other markets because, mind you, the demand is stable in Europe. So you might say, why not? But of course, we also know of the regulations that we have that European producers need to abide to and adhere to. And those imports into Europe, whether it's including recycled plastics, for instance, might not have to adhere to the same rules, meaning then that we certainly need to focus on certification and those imports, making sure that we play on a level playing field. So that will be critical for us moving forward. And that is what we also mean with looking very much at competitiveness. And just to stress as well that Plastics Europe as well, we still, of course, in this new political climate, we want the Green Deal to succeed. This is not only an environmental objective, this is also, it makes sense from an economic objective. It makes sense to preserve our self-sufficiency as a geopolitical player. So that is very important. But indeed, as it was mentioned before, we will need to be a bit more smart in the implementation with having this industrial strategy in mind, with the economic incentives that also Ms. Stojka referred to. This is, of course, elements that we also support and we stand ready. We also have a plan as the plastics industry. So we are committed to the Green Deal. We have launched our transition document as plastics industry in Europe. We aim for a 65% circular plastics by 2050, meaning moving away from fossil-based as a raw material to produce plastics. And of course, we also aim and contribute to that net zero context also by 2050. This is ambitious, and we will need the enabling conditions that also Ms. Stojka and other panelists have referred to. That is for sure. So I would really much plead for this new political mandate as well, that we work much more together from the government side at the EU, but also at the member state level, and also from the industry and also our social partners. I think when I heard Jean-Marc also saying the current rules are not sufficient, we need more. We seen in a prudent light, we would agree to a certain extent where we still will need smart targets, for instance, on recycled content targets, because we will need all of our supply chain partners to invest towards the same goals. And so it's not only us as polymer producers who can do this. We need our converters, we need our recyclers, we need the brands, we need waste management, we need collection and sorting to all invest in that capacity and infrastructure. So those smart targets on recycled content, whether it's for packaging, end-of-life vehicles, in the building at the EU level, that would really drive that circular economy for plastics, for instance. So that is certainly something that we will hold on to and hope this will still be the case in this new political mandate moving forwards. Perhaps I'll stop here, as otherwise I'll just continue and maybe there are some more questions.
Thank you very much. And just for the next round, I would like you also to ask questions to each other during your rounds. And there are new questions appearing in the Q&A, but now I will do a small second round, and then I will introduce questions from the Q&A. So I will come back now to Minister Urszula Zielińska. Pani Minister, no to wracając, mówiła Pani
Miss Minister,
bardzo wyraziście o tym,
you clearly spoke about why in the European Union we need green regulations. We need them globally as well. Consequently, I'd like to ask one more question, because Minister Połczyńska-Nałęcz and the member of the European Parliament, Halicki, talked about the need for changes in the Green Deal Fit for 55 package as well. What kind of changes, what kind of amendments and reviews Poland would like to see, in your opinion? And I also have another question from the second round of questions. We are going towards energy transition. How can we at the same time support the development of competitiveness and entrepreneurship of Polish enterprises and European Union enterprises? Thank you very much for this question. First of all,
nad jakimi zmianami powinniśmy pracować?
What kind of amendments should be at the core of our work? I believe that, first of all, we should strengthen communication and information campaigns around all types of legislative packages which are to introduce amendments,
so that
European societies can really know and feel and understand the objectives of these changes much better than before. So first and foremost, I think that we need a pan-European strong information and communication policy, which is very clear about specific benefits, which it can provide evidence for in numbers. Because we have a lot of studies that show that every zloty invested in implementing let's take nature restoration law mentioned by Mr. Jarubas. So we know that every zloty invested in that will give us benefits that will give us 9 times more in value. We have very specific, concrete calculations for all member states. In Poland, the benefits are 9 times as higher than the costs are. In other member states, it can be even stronger depending on the individual challenges. But the society needs to know about it, needs to be told about it, needs to feel the benefits in their lives, see the benefits in their pockets or in the quality of their health. At the same time, we have to realize that on the opposite side, there is a very strong and well-organized disinformation campaign carried out by the extreme right through the hands of troll farms, which we know about. So, first of all, we have to focus on the benefits. We have to be very clear about them, and people need to feel the benefits before we put some additional obligations on them. I think maybe in this regard, we've had an imbalance. We started by imposing obligations on people, and then when they oppose them, we defended our ideas and said, okay, but if you do that, if you comply, you will save this and that amount of money or have other benefits. I think it has to happen in the opposite order. Yes, competitiveness. We have to become more competitive as European industries in competition with other regions, with China. It's very important, especially in the field of new technologies. Imagine, ladies and gentlemen, when we look at solar energy technologies. China invests more in installed capacity, in technology itself, invests more than Europe and the rest of the world. The effect is that PV panels are imported to Europe, mainly from China. We can't allow to give up on other technologies like that, on hydrogen, or heat storage or energy storage facilities. We are developing these technologies. For example, in Poland, we've made some positive experiences. We see that the potential is there, but we can lose the potential very fast because nowadays China invests much more than we do in all green technologies, and they invest more than whole Europe taken together. So we must avoid mistakes made by the European Parliament in the last term, for example, regarding farmers. When the European Parliament, the European Commission allowed for importation of food, I mean this liberal agreement with the Mercosur, or allowing for importation of food produced using pesticides that are not allowed in Europe. Unfortunately, the Parliament voted in favor of such solutions. Or the common agricultural policy, the way it distributes subsidies or payments per hectare leads disadvantage of smaller farmers in a sense because they have fewer hectares. They get less support. We haven't been able to shorten the supply chain for food. So there was this policy from the field to the fork. It was supposed to shorten the process, shorten the chain, so that farmers can make more money on the products, on the produce they grow in Europe, to make it profitable to grow food in Europe. We haven't done it, and it made farmers unhappy. This unhappiness was very easily used by lobbyists, large lobbyists, so willing to sell more and more pesticides to us. So this large producer lobby, I'm talking about producers of plant protection products or crop protection products, they were very active, especially in the first round of protests. They criticized provisions that suggest that the amount of pesticides in agriculture should be abused. So I think we've just spilled the baby out with the bathwater.
byli niezadowoleni,
when we were trying to introduce these positive changes, because we've made farmers unhappy on the one hand, and we haven't really addressed the real reasons for their unhappiness. And then this feeling was abused or used by large industrial players or lobbyists. And yet we do need these legal provisions because we don't need more pesticides in our food. We need less of it. We must not make similar mistakes in the future. We should avoid such mistakes in the next 4 years, in the next term. Especially that we are now dealing with more extreme parties that are now represented in the parliament. They will have a voice. So we have to be very smart in designing new policies, new programs to emphasize benefits and to provide good funding and support so that the public is not afraid of new regulations, but knows that new legal provisions are introduced in the benefit. Thank you very much. You have made several important appeals. Director Aurel Siobanu-Dortia has joined us in the meantime, but we still can't see his image, so I'll still wait with my question to him. Once the technical problem has been solved, we will come back to you with my question.
Mrs. Stoika, you were talking a lot about that we need to achieve competitiveness. You were also mentioning the direct ways to do that. So I would like to ask you, how to achieve better implementation, how to scale up the investments, because you were saying we need that, and how to ensure we have that as Europe, how to find clever ways to guarantee investment, how to create the market. I'm asking that as a follow-up to the first round when you were saying that we need that, but how to achieve this?
Yeah, thank you for these follow-up questions. I see them twofold. One, we can envisage already what are the tools, and second is political willingness. So on how to better implement the legislation, I think so. First and foremost is I think to make sure that, for example, businesses are helped in implementing the requirements, the legislation. We do legislation where, admittedly, sometimes it's very broad. It tackles certain issues, and then we also have this the governance element of each sort of piece of legislation, right? Where we try to provide support to the member states, to industry via forums such as expert groups, and then we phase into the enforcement side or market surveillance, where there we also have a lot of foreign platforms to support both member states and the industry. But there is one element which I saw this, and we all see it coming more and more, is how to make best use of digitization. Because through digitalization, be it the uptake of the digitalization in business processes, so that's the business, let's say, of each company, how they want to go about it, but also public services and public administration. And there we see a huge scope to improve things and to streamline, to become more effective, more efficient, but also to leverage more this sort of cohabitation we have between public administration and citizens, and make the life of citizens much easier. So yeah, one way would be digitalization, as I see it. Then we speak about implementation. It's implementation that goes hand in hand with enforcement. So that, of course, it's one area where we know there is more work that needs to be done, and this was clearly spelled out in, I would say, all forums from political level to technical level, at least those that we know in the Commission. So enforcement, very, very important. We know there are member states who are more proactive, others they are more reactive. There is a lot of also room of interpretation, but that's yeah, that's where I would say things can also be highly improved enforcement. Then you were mentioning about scaling up and how to redirect investments to make sure that the scale up is taken up. I would say when we speak about scale up, if I well understood your question, it's of course it is about investment, how we are going to use the funds, how we are going to redirect the funds, how we are picking, the projects which are the ones that merit more sort of to put more effort and attention within. But there are also other means to do it. So standardization, for example. Standardization is an area where we can sort of plug it in the last phases of research and innovation. They are so-called technical readiness levels. So basically a product, when it's innovated, it passes through these technical readiness levels until it reaches a level of maturity to be deployed on the market. So basically, we do not really need to start to work on standards and technical specification in standards when the product is already mature and ready to be deployed, but already in the late stages of research and innovation. And this way, I think it will make a difference to help startups and companies, small companies, to upscale. Of course, how we are redirecting our funds and calls under the different programs we have, Horizon, etc. That's also that's also a good point. But I will not have specific answers to give you here. But we know which are the tools, and I think we just need to be more dialed in with the reality and to adapt and streamline our existing processes. Yeah. So I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, you did. And now our great test, if we can hear Director Aurel Ciobanu Dordia. Hi, Director Ciobanu. Can you say something?
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me.
We hear you. Yes,
Miracles
great.
happen. We need
so
3
happy.
devices to connect.
Yes, I'm so happy. So I will ask you several questions in a row. So maybe first, many stakeholders, experts, farmers, even citizens are talking about the need of weakening or postponing of green regulations, including Green Deal, packaging waste regulation, ETS2, energy performance of buildings directive. From Commissioner Dombrovskis to Poland's Minister for Funds and Regional Development, what revisions, if revisions, are possible? So it would be the first question. Second, Europe is losing out to subsidize the production of China and the US. There was already some discussion here during this panel about it. China is also dominating EVs or solar photovoltaic modules. How circular and Green Deal Europe can be still competitive in such asymmetrical competition? And maybe third, what new regulation shall we expect from the side of the European Commission?
Yeah, look, very big questions and too many things bundled together. So first of all, about postponing the legislation. We believe that it would not be sound for the European industry and from the European agricultural sector, and we mean for all member states, to postpone deadlines. I think we need to discuss, to be able to discuss together about how to get to the implementation of what has been agreed. Why is it so? There was a political process at the level of the European Parliament and at the level of the Council. Member states have participated. We have procedures in place which have secured the legitimacy of the decision-making processes. Instability is not good for the European businesses. So we rather get now to the drawing board and we sit together with the member states and with the industrial associations and the agricultural associations in order to see how we put into application what has been adopted. Second, in the competition with China and with the United States and other global players, we believe that not only Europe leads from the angle of sustainability in many industrial areas, but we have the possibility to enhance our leadership. And China is looking at Europe and is learning the lessons from Europe in terms of sustainability. We should learn as well from them that good organization is indispensable in order to preserve leadership, and we should not let China take over the leadership on solar panels, on batteries, on electric vehicles. Rather, and here is the connection with the reply to the first question, instead of postponing and quarreling as we do often in Europe, we should rather sit together around the same table and make a plan about how we implement and we preserve our leadership. And we believe that Europe is, together with the United States and far lesser China, Europe is a continent of innovation. We have invented green technologies and we can preserve our leadership if we continue to innovate and if we implement what we have decided. So we should not relent.
And what new regulation shall we expect from the European Commission soon?
Look, I think this is highly speculative, and also it's a big question which covers many areas. What do you want to hear? Environment, climate, energy?
Environment, climate, energy.
I think speaking about political process and legitimacy, we should, I mean, we are all aware, we just had, in Poland as well, the elections for the European Parliament. There is a political process through which a new leadership of the European Commission is being set up. And the political program will be subject to the discussion of the member states in the Council and to the vote of the European Parliament, in the Parliament. So give us until the end of this year, and there will be a political program which will announce which initiatives will be brought forward in these areas. It's not for me or anyone else at this stage, maybe with the exception of the President designate of the European Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, it's not for me to announce here any new initiative. Only the President designate has now this prerogative. But the Commission will be in a position in December or even in November to announce a political program.
Okay, I hope for some light shedding, but it's
Call
great
us
anyway.
back in November. Call us back in November.
Yes.
And we will be able to respond in much better technological conditions.
I'm sure everyone hopes so. Thank you very much. Now I will turn to Polish and I will ask the question to Adam Jarubas. Panie pośle, jakie zmiany są pana zdaniem potrzebne w kontekście
Adam Jarubas, member of the parliament. According to you, what type of changes are necessary in the context of European Green Deal? What do you think about the goal of 90% GHG reduction for 2040? And how can we make climate and environmental policies more acceptable for our citizens? I would like to come back to what Minister Zielińska mentioned. She emphasized economic incentives. Regulations are mainly obligations. However, here what is important is to develop a balance of various incentives, making those policies more implementable and, colloquially speaking, more digestible for our population in Poland. In Poland, one of the sources which could finance investments in economy concerning net zero technologies or energy industry, this source is KPO, and we are 2 years behind here. This is a serious risk, and we should learn how to use it efficiently. Hopefully, we will succeed here. So we need more incentives, and research shows that catastrophic scenarios do not make an impression on our citizens, and we have to back it up with economic drivers, economic incentives. The basis is the regulation. It has already been worked on during the previous term of office, but we should also notice the global landscape and social reactions. We should notice all this population's reactions during voting campaigns. We should look at ETS without rejecting the ETS2 in its totality. We should consider prolonging the maximum price mechanism. We succeeded in implementing it in the market system. There is the price ceiling counteracting excessive price fluctuation. That is at the level of 45 euros per 1 ETS ton in ETS2. We should strengthen mechanisms counteracting this fluctuation on the ETS1 market. We should look into the role of financial institutions, which could offer such price impulses here. It's worth to look into withdrawal of the registration on not net zero cars in further years, and we should look into CBAM mechanism. I was the rapporteur in this case, and we should look into prolonging deadlines for implementation, for coming into force, and broadening the range of complex products and imported products. Here I'm talking mainly about small domestic appliances. For example, I am skeptic concerning 90% goal. I am skeptical here. Commission introduced 3 variants here from 80% up to 95% reduction for 2040, and this analysis shows that reduction of over 85% will trigger reduction in private transportation and transferring it into bicycle and public transportation. I would be apprehensive to communicate it to citizens, for example, to Polish citizens, as an obligation imposed on them. Most probably, we should look more into the 80% target, and the whole policy should be delivered in such a way where it is consulted with citizens instead of imposing it and forcing out certain style of life because there are provisions which are translated into the cost of living. You have already mentioned competitiveness, and the Green Deal is also economic strategy. We shouldn't forget about this perspective. It is for us to be competitive. We want to have important place in in all the supply chain in technology, but we also have to look into what is going on globally. In the USA, we have $3 billion pumped into carbon net zero and carbon low emission economy. Europe does not have such funds at their disposal. We have to look at it, we have to notice it. If we were to have flexible public aid, then maybe we should follow Henry Canetti and create special fund for such solutions, and all the countries which benefit from more flexible public aid should contribute to this fund. In this way, we would not have any disturbances on the internal market, and our internal market is very important. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank you.
So in the last round, you were saying that energy and environment strategies of the European Union don't really translate into ambitious reality results. Still, citizens, farmers, also what Adam Jarubas was mentioning, don't, well, they often fear new regulations on that, and they find the European Union as too ambitious. So how, in your view, can we sell European Green Deal and other regulation as smart and as worthy?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that's the million-dollar question. Honestly, I think there is a song that says that if you do what you have always done, you'll get what you have always got, right? And I feel that the European Union, I mean, we have been trying to optimize a system that is probably now running out of steam, because we're just trying to milk a cow that doesn't have milk left. I think there's some changes that need to happen there. And Mr. Jarubas has mentioned rightly that it's true that, I mean, we need resources to actually finance the right things. The problem that we have in Europe is that, again, we're trying to push competitiveness through technology, innovation, and all of that is important. But if we look at actually the environmental legislation, I think that that's the most competitive European countries are the ones that have more stringent social and environmental rules. The question I think here to ask is actually how are we using the resources that we have? And again, it's true the European Union doesn't have the resources today, but the United States didn't have the resources 150 years ago either. There came a time when actually the United States had to realize that they need a federal budget to do the right investments, and that federal budget needs to be financed. And for me, that's one of the key questions that the European Union sits since the moment it was founded. And I'm aware of the concept of the problem with pooling sovereignty here, but without European taxation, not adding taxes, but shifting taxes to where actually more efficiently actually you raise resources, that's how actually you can mobilize the resources you need to build infrastructure and actually to make the things work. This is the kind of systemic change that Europe cannot continue to postpone, because otherwise we're not going to have the level of resources we need. We're not going to have the firepower, and we don't have, it's also a single market, it's infrastructure, it's so many things that Europe doesn't have the tools for. So how long do we need to wait for the European Union to have the tools that actually a country managing a single market should have? So I would leave it there for the moment. I think taxation for me is a long overdue. Again, taxation doesn't mean taxing more. It means taxing differently, looking for efficient taxes. It means shifting taxes from labor that today is very probably expensive comparatively, but there's lots of capital in Europe that could be taxed. Lots of this capital actually doesn't even belong to Europeans. Most of the poor people in Europe actually would not suffer from this. And we need to look into this. And without the systemic change, I'm afraid continuing to insist in innovation, technology, etc., without the means to support the scaling up the infrastructure and all this, because we don't have it, it's going to be a problem. So I will leave there.
Thank you very much. So smart taxation. And I would like to turn to Virginia. You said that we want a Green Deal to succeed. So I would like to ask you, what would be the enabling conditions, enabling context on the side of the European Union for that to succeed and for businesses to achieve as much circularity as possible?
Thank you for the question. Look, I really like the distinction that Mrs. Stoica also used. So on one hand, it's we need to look at the tools and economic incentives, what have you. There, but a strong case for the political, for the plastics industry in particular is some political will, is political support. We have seen many regulations for us. Our industry in Europe. I think now I referred earlier to our transition roadmap that we have commonly agreed to as an industry in Europe. So we've got our plan together. Indeed, the enabling conditions are very immediate, middle term, longer term. But for sure, the political will, the collaboration, the political spine to actually realize, yes, guys, the plastics industry or plastics is not equal to a yogurt pot. We are actually in every critical sector that is needed to transition to sustainable green Europe. So we are in solar, we are in digital, we are in building and construction, in medicine, in aerospace, in whatever you can think of, there is plastics needed. So it is really for our self-sufficiency that I would really plead to have some local, and I mean European production left for the plastics industry here to do just that and to also help us transition. We also, needless to say, it's not only our own transition, but it's also the transition of the other sectors that need plastics to transition to this net zero ambition. So that is something I hope is now more and more understood also from the political level. So that is what I mean with the political will and working more together with industry to get to those circular plastics and net zero. Then in terms of circularity, I think what we have with the packaging waste regulation, for instance, the 30% recycled content targets, yes, great. This is exactly a kind of smart target that we need. Food contact sensitive targets, yes, there is now a careful 10%, great. We will need all kinds of recycling technologies for that, including chemical recycling. What we need to be very mindful there is, and the Commission and the team of Orelle as well, I mean, they're doing a crazy job because there's a lot to implement, to work on, but the secondary legislation is...
We have internet trouble with Virginia. Virginia, we don't hear you. You froze.
We did a survey with our members.
Okay, now it's fine.
Invest 9 billion euro in chemical recycling. If I would do the survey again, I'm not sure that will still be the case because we are very late in providing that clarity, predictability, measuring of is chemical recycling recognized as recycling technology, what's the business case for it. So these are the elements where I hope we can speed up the process a bit more in this new climate. And then of course also in incentivizing more separate collection and sorting for recycling, harmonizing that across the EU. More is needed on EPR infrastructure. Let's de-incentivize energy recovery to the best as we can. Maybe we need, and we support that. And Zero Waste Europe has also co-signed something with us in terms of putting energy recovery under the ETS mechanism so that we actually discourage energy recovery and encourage recycling. To really get to those circular plastics that we all want. So these are some concrete elements that we would like to favor. I mentioned the certification that we need to have an eye on for those imports that are coming into Europe, that we have that level playing field. And then certainly also the permitting. My members have some large scale investments going on. I'm talking, for instance, now INEOS, the Project One project, 4 billion euro project, if I'm not mistaken. They still don't have the permit. They're already building, and it's this kind of investor insecurity. The world is looking at this, business is looking at this, and it's just not working in our favor. I just wanted to be very concrete here.
Yeah, you are. Thank you, thank you. Very illustrative. Thank you very much. So now a very short time for the Q&A, and maybe I don't know. Okay, just a Q&A, but I will ask you all to whatever the number of questions, to be providing answers that are really concrete, like in 20 seconds per answer. So probably shorter than the questions itself. So maybe I will start with Minister Zielińska. I will ask you 2 questions of these that I see. So one from the Q&A. Podobno wiele ciekawych pierwiastków
We hear
jest
there's
w
many
hałdach przy kopalniach.
interesting elements can be sourced from mining waste. Has research been done in this regard? Maybe it would be a chance for Silesian companies. We have many recycling start-up companies in Poland. What's the opinion of the government? We don't see systematic support for such startup companies. Are we not missing a chance that is there? The second one, maybe let's keep it shorter. Will there be any subsidies for replacing gas-fired boilers with other heating sources? Thank you very much. Circular economy is absolutely the economy that has a lot of potential. We will invest in it. We will speed up. We have sped up already. Starting at the beginning of this year, we implemented a whole package of directives addressing recycling and plastics. Of course, it's already very late in Poland, we realize, but we are speeding it up. The same applies dealing with illegal waste disposal. We are also introducing a new DRS system so that we can further increase the level of recycling of packaging materials in Poland. So that's very briefly about question 1. About question 2, so already today there is the Clean Air program in Poland, which includes funding for other heat sources than coal or gas-fired boilers. We want people to invest in thermal insulation and zero emissions heat sources through these subsidies. We are making this program more efficient to avoid a situation that we saw in the past where heat pumps were installed, but the buildings were hardly insulated. So in the end, people paid more for heating and not less. But the program is being streamlined. It is already in place. We are now streamlining it so that efficient support is available for private households. We can cover up to 90% of replacement costs. So the instruments are in place. Already we are introducing new ones, by the way. Let me just mention one because it's very close to my heart. So local heating transition. We have a whole package of programs for green heating to further cut emissions. It will involve heat pumps and heat storage, PV, wind energy. So concrete projects are already underway. They are funded by the EU. We know because we have concrete data that it is cost-effective. The investment pays off. These technologies generate more heat than traditional solutions because the installations are already in place in many places. So we know that they are efficient. Of course, an initial investment is necessary, but it is a great chance to replace sources of energy, replace coal-based energy with green energy. We have 23 billion zloty for such programs. So we will be funding such projects. I would like to encourage you, ladies and gentlemen, to apply when it's made available, because we want to be very practical in supporting industries, businesses, local communities in this shift towards renewable energy, because we believe that this is the way to go. Thank you very much. Next question to the director. 20 seconds.
Answer, please, to the question to Mr. Director Ciobanu Dordia. How strategically the circular economy is currently perceived? What about circularity of the life path of critical materials so that Europe can become more independent material-wise, so with less imports and less local mining?
So can you repeat again what is the question in a sentence?
How strategically is perceived, is circular economy now perceived? And on that, what about circularity of the life path of critical material so that Europe can become more independent material-wise?
Yeah, I was just replying in the chat box about this. We believe that the COVID crisis and actually the war in Ukraine is accentuating the case for more circularity and for more strategic autonomy on the side of the European Union. This means that we need to do more with the existing resources and with the resources that we have in Europe, and rely less on imports of strategic raw materials. So circularity is a response to difficult geopolitical circumstances, and they will certainly become easier in the years to come. If we think about the elections in the United States.
We don't hear you. We don't hear you well now again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Something broke about the sound quality. But still, thank you. And I'm really sorry about this.
Sorry about this. Sorry about it.
Okay. Thank you. Now I come to Adam Jarubas. Jeśli chodzi o transformację energetyczną,
Adam Jarubas, so energy transition, how to move from level of legislation to the executive level in a feeling of cooperation rather than obligations and impositions. You have 20 seconds. And so if we offer people really good conditions and the institutions responsible are able to do it, we will be able, what we see in Poland right now, 6,000 applications for furnace replacement under the Clean Air Program, which means that our citizens are enthusiastic about protecting climate, especially when they have save money at the same time. So the more similar mechanisms we have, the more people will be interested in joining in. Thank you very much. Perhaps we will have some time later for silver bullet points.
How does the European Union encourage entrepreneurs to follow economic policy regulations?
Yeah, thank you. Mindful of the time. I don't know how to read that. It's encouragement, like you say to your child. I encourage you to go to school because it will pay off later when you'll be an adult, or rather support the entrepreneurs, support the SME, support micro enterprise, support startups. And on that front, we start from the genesis of our legislation through impact assessment competitiveness check, where we really zoom into the needs of SMEs and micro enterprises, and we take them into account, and we have a whole range of framework to make sure that everything we do takes into account the needs of SMEs. But then there is the other sort of side of the coin, which is investment funding. How do we help them into funding their ideas and their projects? And I think there we stay pretty well. I said we are very good in research and innovation. But then is also we noticed, for example, and we heard that from the member states. I heard quoted the Netherlands as a benchmark. From the Netherlands, I've just learned recently that they have over prescription of very good projects coming from startups, and what we are going to do about them. So this is something I think we need to take in our radar, and to make sure that every good project and every great idea deserve benefits of the right attention in terms of funding and support from us, the government.
Thank you. Jean-Marc Simon, according to Zero Waste Europe, the possible manipulation of recycling results is paradigmatic of current EU trades. Why do you think countries are afraid of deposit return system that Poland is going to implement from the beginning of the next year?
Well, I would say that I don't think that countries are afraid. I mean, it is a fact, because it's been proven that the deposit and return systems actually deliver the rates that are needed to meet the European targets. There's some countries that refuse to implement measures like this because there are economic interests to preserve the status quo. And when you cannot meet the targets with the right tools, then you need to cook the figures, and that's what some countries we see are doing. So there's nothing new there, but I think what is needed here is the right measures for monitoring that data reporting is happening as it should be, and the European Commission and the member states need to make sure that the law is enforced and the data is monitored. Otherwise, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Virginia, which EU regulatory actions or policies does industry fear the most?
Oh, excellent. I would say policies that are not sustained by facts, nor are scientific based, nor have the political leadership until the end. And with that, I mean, I have a concrete example with the packaging waste regulation. We now have all of a sudden 100% reuse targets for plastics transport packaging. And that based on our calculations and also based on the environmental objectives that we all want, this is completely not necessary. So that is one concrete example where I think we went a bit too far, and we might have been too fast. So overall, also there with the chemical recycling secondary legislation example I gave, that is perhaps something where we, with the European Commission, the EU is working too slow in terms of giving that investor confidence to invest in Europe, for instance. That's another example. So yeah, I think I gave enough examples of, or more an aggregate level, which criteria we are using in terms of what we support and work with, and where we think the EU is going too fast without that lens also on the competitiveness, and without the lens of that we are actually operating in a global world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So the time for a very short sum up. So I would like to ask everyone for your silver bullet solutions, one sentence on how to make green European regulations great or working again. So let's start with Urszula Zielińska, pani minister.
Musimy sprawić, żeby one
we have to make it all sound attractive so that people believe that they can see and they can feel benefits in their own lives in terms of their own pockets and health today. It is difficult, but it's not inachievable. We have many examples which prove it, that we have to show those examples in practice. And I believe that the new European Parliament can create communication, adequate communication to our European citizens in order to encourage them and convince them that all that we do here is beneficial for that. And we should accelerate our work and not slow it down. Thank you very much, Minister. Now the question to our member of the European Parliament. Better communication, economic competitiveness, greater ambitions, and more talks with people. Thank you very much. Ms. Felicia Stoik.
Yeah, from my side, higher level of political, social, economic consciousness that the Green Deal is a strong case for prosperity, including economic growth and jobs.
Thank you so much. And Jean-Marc Simon, your sentence.
I think that doing the right thing should be easier and cheaper than doing the wrong thing. So the system just needs to be geared to that.
Thank you. And last but not least, Virginia Janssens.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood the question, but I think it's more of a wrap up on one sentence, which I already did now. Sorry. So let's just make the green. We support it full-heartedly, making the Green Deal work for Europe, not against it. Creating a balance between, or a better balance between, ambitious and realistic circularity targets, policies, and industry and our competitiveness. And how to do that is to truly work together, all partners, in a trustful relationship and working towards the same goals, which I think we all support for a thriving and competitive and sustainable Europe.
A great wrap-up. Thank you very much. Doszliśmy w ten sposób do końca naszej debaty. Byli z nami minister Urszula.
The end of our debate. We have Minister Urszula Zielińska, Member of the Parliament Adam Jarubas, Aurel Ciobanu-Derbija, Felicia Stoika, Jean-Marc Simon, and Virginia Janssens. Thank you very much for your participation in our debate. I would like to thank our panelists and our listeners. Next week, we will publish the report, including the most important quotations from our debate. And right now, I would like to wish you all a great afternoon and see you next time. Thank you very much.